Hello everyone, my name is Thomas, and today in this short video we're going to be talking about this color panel right here in Adobe Illustrator. Now, if you're used to working in Photoshop, this color panel is going to look a little bit weird to you. And if we hop into Photoshop real quick, you'll see that down here where we have these two colored squares, we have our foreground color, our background color, and then just the kind of reset button, as well as the switching foreground and background color. So if I change this to a red, and I change the other one to a green, I can swap these two around as your foreground or your background color. And if I don't want either and just want it to go back to black to white, I can just hit this button and it'll be done. Now in Adobe Illustrator, things work a little bit different. When you're working with shapes and you create a shape, what you'll see is if I change this to a different color by double clicking, if I change this to, we'll go with an orange color, what you'll see happen when I draw a rectangle is that it's orange, as you'd expect. But on the sides, you'll see that there's a black stroke around it. If I select this, I can go to this properties panel over here, and I can bump up the stroke on it. And if I want it just to keep growing, I can hold it and let it take over the entire square. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to bump it down to like 10. And so the way this works is that when you draw a shape, you have your color, your fill color, and then you have your stroke and your stroke color. And the way this works is that when you want to select your fill color, you'll double click this square and you'll select what color you want. And if you want to change your stroke color, you'll double click that and you'll see that it comes to the front now. Now this square is in front of that one. That just means that your stroke color is kind of selected. Now you can change the color to this. So if say we wanted a, we'll go with a red. And we'll go like this maroon color. So now if we draw a square, you'll see now that we have this beige fill with this red maroon outside, the stroke. And this is how any shape you create will be filled in. If I do the same thing with the pen tool and start creating lines, you'll see that it's filled in with the same colors as this square. Again, a beige brown inside with a maroonish red outside. In the same way that Photoshop has the foreground background color as well as the reset and reverse, you have the same options here. You can set so here we have the red as our stroke. We can press this button up here, swap button, and now our fill is our red color. I'll just move it over here, get rid of this. Our fill is now our red with the brown as our stroke. And again, if you want to reset everything to black and white, you can just click the button down here and it'll reset. Now, white will always be your fill color. Again, you can just press the button and it'll switch. But just be aware that when you hit reset, white will always be your fill color. So if we select everything and delete it, we'll go to our next options, which are gradient fills. So if we click this, you'll see that a menu comes up. And this is our gradient properties menu. If it doesn't pop up when you click down here, you either have it selected, or what you can do is you can go to Window and Gradient, and it'll bring it up. So if we bring it over here, you'll see that our stroke square now has this gradient going across it. And this works both for your fill and your stroke. So if I go back to my fill and click the gradient button down here, you'll see that now there's a gradient on our fill. If I want the stroke back to black, I can click this button. So what these three buttons are a solid color fill, a gradient fill, or no fill at all. So if you don't want a stroke on your shapes, you'll click none, and you'll see that a red line goes across. And this works for the fill color as well. So if we set this back to black and go back here and say we don't want any fill, this means that we'll have no fill but a black stroke. So again, no fill with black stroke. And if I put something under it, say let me select a color first. We'll go with a red with a a similar pink, and we'll select a new color, and we'll make sure that this is underneath. We want the filled in square to be underneath the unfilled square, and you'll see that if we drag it under, this unfilled square is over top the filled square, but you can still see the filled square underneath because there is no fill. Surprise, surprise. And all of these parameters can be changed on the fly. So say we want this square to be filled in. What we can do is we can go to our square and say we want this filled with a gradient. You can see that I click the gradient button and it's now filled in with gradient. You can't see the pink square behind it anymore. To change the gradient, what you'll do is within the gradient properties menu, to change the properties of the gradient, what you'll do is you'll go to the gradient properties menu, again, Windows gradient if it's not already there for you. And here is where you'll be modifying your gradient. So up top, we have our types of gradients. So we have 3 types. We have a linear, which is the standard one, left to right in one direction. It's one directional. The gradient goes from left to right, top to bottom, diagonal left, diagonal right. It'll only go in one direction from one color to a different color, or multiple colors in between, but it'll always be flowing in one direction. So you can see this goes from white to black, left to right. If we have our shape selected, we can change the gradient and say we want a radial gradient. And as you can see, a radial gradient is a gradient that goes from light to dark, or goes from one color to another, from one point and spreads outward in a circle. The next type of gradient that we have is the freeform gradient. And this works very interesting. How this works is if you were kind of to drop drops of food coloring into some water and have them naturally mix together, this is what you'd see. So from here it looks like we have our stroke color, the darker magenta. Here we have our fill colors. This was the lighter magenta, and then Illustrator chose white as our kind of final fill color. And what these do is they dynamically change the gradient. So if I were to click and drag on, say, this white one, you can see that things start to happen and the gradient starts to change depending on where this white node is. So you see, if I get a little closer to here, there's a gradient from here to here, this white to this lighter magenta. If we go down here, see that now there's a different gradient between these two and these two. And you can just kind of mess around. To add a new node, you'll just click anywhere on screen. And again, you can change this however you want. To change the color, what you'll do is you'll double click and you'll be able to select a color either by changing these sliders. So say I wanted a more cyan color. It's a little laggy, but if I let go, you'll see that the color is changed. And now if I click out, I can drag this around and put cyan wherever I want. You can also change the spread. So if I click on a dot, I can go to this other dot with the circle around it and I can drag it. And this affects how big the gradient is, how much it spreads. And there's a limited range, so I can only go from here to here, which drastically changes the look. But you have to know your limitations. So if you want more of this cyan color, what you'll do is you'll just add a new node. And now you have a new cyan node that you can mess around with. So you want this horizontal band of cyan. Well, there you go. get rid of a node, what you'll do is you'll click it and then hit delete or backspace. And you'll see that the gradient now adjusts itself. Now if we go back to the other gradients, you'll see that a new line has appeared. This kind of bar. Now this is your edit properties. So if you don't see this, say you clicked away, what you can do is you can click the shape that you want to change and go to edit gradient. And the bar will be brought back up. Now what this bar does is just changes how intense the gradient is. So you'll see that we have a black dot, a white dot, another white sort of square, a diamond, black circle, and then a black dot. So the way to adjust this gradient is by dragging these 3 dots to various locations. So what I can do is if I grab this white dot and click and drag, I can bring the gradient so that way it's pure white all the way from this left edge all the way to here, and then it's only from this point to this point that the gradient starts. It's only from here to here that the gradient goes from white to black. If I bring it back out, you'll see that the gradient goes back to normal. Same with the black dot. I can bring it all the way over here, and I can bring it all the way back, and you see it does the same thing as the white one. The center diamond here, what it does is it adjusts the intensity of either one without bringing all of the color to it. So you see when I brought this black dot over, all of this is now pure black. There is no gradient here. Now, so what I can do with this white square is I can drag it left and right, and it'll adjust the intensity of the gradient. So while I can't eliminate it completely, what I can do is I can shift the balance. So I say, okay, I want a little bit more black over here, but I don't want to make this entirety just pure black. Say I just want a little bit more black influence, or a little bit more white influence in this case. And it's harder to see when you don't have the dynamic range. The next thing we'll look at is the angle. And what you'll see is that when you go down to this drop down menu, this is the angle. And hover over it and it says angle. What you do is when you go down to this drop down menu, you'll have various options: 30, 45, 60, 90, 120, 135, 150, 180, and the same things in the negative. So if I adjust this 90 degrees, now the gradient, instead of going from left to right, black to white to black, it'll go from black to white, top to bottom. Or if I want it in the other direction, I can do negative 90, and it'll go from white to black, top to bottom. You can type in your own values here, so if I want 36, I can have 36 degrees of angle, or 85. Just highlight it by double clicking, and then type in 85, and that's an 85 degree angle. And again, the same adjustments can be made. It's no different than it was when it was set at 0. This slider bar here is the same thing as these controls right here on this bar, but from here what you can do is you can add colors. So you'll see that in the middle nothing happens, but if I have my cursor just below the line, you'll see that the cursor now has a plus button in front of it, or to the side of it. What I can do is I can click and add a color. I can then double click and it'll bring up a menu that allows me to change that color. So if I want cyan, or purple, a very vibrant purple, I can have that. And I have the same controls as I do here. I can move this left or right. Careful you don't go too far from the bar. I can go left or right, and I can adjust the influence for each color. So instead of from black to white, it'll do from black to purple or purple to white. I can adjust the influence, and you'll see that it updates over here. If I don't want a color, what I can do is I can click it and click the trash button or delete stop. And that'll reset it to whatever color you had before. And I can add it. Say you want it to pick from this bar. There, now you have a pink bar. You can also change the order in which these colors come from just by dragging them to opposite sides. So if I want pink to be the end, I can have it be on the end. I can adjust from there. Same controls. And if you want to get rid of a color, just slide it off until you'll see that the bar changes. Opacity changes the opacity of the gradient. So you'll see I set it at 40%. Now we can see a little bit of the pink box underneath. And location deals with whatever node you have selected, whatever color node you have selected, determines how far it'll be along the bar. So from the left being 0 and the right side being 100. So right now the white node is on the left, so it's at 0%. But if I set it to say 40%, it'll go 40% through the bar, and now we have it over here. If I set it to 90%, now it's way over here, very close to the black node. The color picker allows you to select a color. So there we go. Now this node here is the same color as this box. Over right here, you have these two gradient bars with arrows pointing towards each other. This is the reverse gradient. This just allows you to switch the direction of the gradient really easily. You can also do this manually just by dragging the two. Here is quick ways to select basically these. So right now, if I have this pink node selected, what you'll see is the fill box is pink and the stroke is still at none. I can change that though by double clicking stroke and selecting a color. Say I want a green stroke. Now if I deselect, you'll see that the box now has a green stroke. Let me zoom in. The stroke is now green. I can also change this to be a gradient itself. So I'm going to make this a little bigger. We'll say 20 pixels. 20 points. And what I can do is, and with the stroke selected, I can press the gradient button, and you'll see that it now develops a gradient. I can have this be the reverse of the fill gradient, and you'll see it much more obviously. So now the gradient starts from black over on the right side, and goes to pink on the left side. One of the interesting things about the stroke select is you can select how the gradient is applied within the stroke. With this one, it starts on one corner and slowly wraps itself around the entire shape. And then the final one is an even gradient around the entire perimeter of the square, or whatever shape you create. So you can mess around with that. Say I want to make this white. Create a very interesting shape right here. A very interesting palette of colors. Quite like it actually. I like how it flows into this shape very, very seamlessly. The final thing we'll talk about is this gradient drop down. If we drop it down, you'll see that there are some presets, some pretty quick, and just a few of them. Make sure you have your shape selected, and what you can do is you can go through. You can say just set it to white to black, or we'll actually do the fill for this. We'll actually make this back to white, I guess. So you can have it as an orange and yellow. You can have it as a fading sky. This is just a common one you'll see used on skies. Or you can have a vignette, which just means the center is transparent and slowly fades to black. So if, for instance, you want to create your own gradient and have it saved to this drop-down menu, what you can do is you can just slightly modify one of the presets, create whatever you want. We'll do purple, do blue, and call it there. And what we can do is we can go down to this drop-down menu and click Add to Swatches. What that'll do is create a new gradient called New Gradient Swatch 1. And what we can do to rename it is go to Window, scroll down to Swatches. You'll see that down here you'll see your swatch, and you'll say New Gradient Swatch 1. So what you can do is you can go down to this bottom menu, and you can go to Swatch Options. Make sure you have this selected. If you just do any one, that's an interesting pattern. If you just click your swatch and then go to Swatch Options, you can rename it. So this one will be called Blue, Purple, Black. There we go. Now we have a swatch called Blue, Purple, Black. But that'll do it for this video. In the next video, we'll be talking about the text tool. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. You have a good one.